Our basic ideas and honorable, our principles are honorable and just. In closing, he said, looking at the young people that wear our uniforms today, and he said, I have faith that we will continue to work for a peaceful world and freedom while firmly resisting those who would enslave mankind. Well, it was Ronald Reagan said, some people spend an entire lifetime wondering if they made a difference. Our armed forces don't have that problem. You think about it when you see an old fella out there, a gal, got a hat on that says veteran, says Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine, Coast Guard. Think about it. He or she put their dreams on hold for yours. And we have young people doing that every day. They, in fact, many are putting their dreams on hold for yours. Yes, in this great land, some people dream the dream. Some people live the dream. Our armed forces defend that dream. God bless the defenders of the dream. Thank you. I'm not sure how much time we have. Yes, sir. Thank you. Yes, sir.
I have a general question. Senator John McCain was a prisoner of war for a number of years, and I think in solitary. And President Trump criticized that, and I'm not sure on what basis, and was it just...
I don't think it's a real basis. I think it was a bad statement by the president, and most of us don't condone it, but if you read in it what he's trying to say, it was correct. Being a prisoner of war did not make you a hero. Your conduct as a prisoner of war made what you are. And I will defend Senator McCain. I don't like his politics at times, but I'll defend him. I jokingly say I was on the welcoming committee because I was there 2 years before he showed up. But he served his country with honor. He went through torture just like the rest of us, and he paid his dues. And I have a dear friend who wrote the foreword for my book, Colonel Bud Day, who's a Medal of Honor recipient. And the reason that John McCain is alive today is because of Bud Day. Bud Day did everything, and Bud told me one day, he says, you know, I only gave one direct order when I was in North Vietnam. He said, I told John McCain he was not going to die under my watch. And Bud Day was credited for saving McCain's life. McCain was very special. He was just nondescript, and he was left to die. I'll be honest with you that we all felt that, he was put over in the corner. He was so beat up, and he'd been beaten by the locals when he was captured, and they just laid him over in the corner and let him die until they figured out who he was. And then and Bud Day will say to this day, of course Bud can't because he's gone on, but Bud, they drug McCain into his cell and said, you make him live. And that's what Bud Day did. But his conduct is unquestionable. I was very disappointed in General McIntyre when he called him a songbird because he was not a songbird. He served his country with honor and dignity throughout his prison time. He was a wild man, but America's full of wild people. And some of them have good ideas and some of them have bad ideas. But yes, sir.
I've got a fairly difficult question for you, and if you don't choose to get into it, that's okay. But your faith in God, I'm trying to imagine what it would be like to be there for 7 years. Did you lose faith in God at some point and then regain faith, or did your faith stayed with you the whole way. How was?
Well, faith played an important role. You know, I said probably before I was on the ground, I invented speed dial because I was talking to a man upstairs. And honestly, faith played an important part. I say that my mother played an important part of my life, even though she died when I was 13 years old. Because somewhere in the Sunday school lesson, she told me one day that, Billy, you'll never be burdened more than you can stand. And I challenged God at times to say, hey, I'm reaching the ends, and it seemed like a voice would say, no, you're not. And it played a real important part to all of us. I'm confident in saying that there's no atheists in the prison camp. There was a few agnostics, but there was no atheists. In fact, I have a dear friend of mine. They asked and said, did you find religion while you were in Vietnam? He said, I did. They said, which one? He said, all of them. And so most of us were men of faith, before we got there. And I think we came out with a stronger faith when we came home. I can remember when I got back, they were all worried about what church I was going to, and I had one aunt that stood up and she said, he's probably closer to God than all of us. And she was right. I didn't have to have any special links or any connection. I had a speed dial from the man, And so, yes, religion played an important part. We had, towards the end, we started having our own church services, and we had lay ministers in our group. In fact, I was with one of our ministers that he was a F4 pilot that he promised the Lord, says, you get me out of this mess, I'll work for you. And he came back and became an Episcopalian minister. And probably many of you saw Gerald Ford's funeral when Gerald Ford was, if you notice that priest did all the stuff hanging on us, he was a former prisoner of war in Vietnam, Bob Certain. He became personal friends with Gerald Ford, and he preached his funeral in California, Michigan, and Washington, D.C. So, and then we had a friend of mine that's a Baptist minister. I asked him, I'm thinking, how many marriages you had since you got back? And you're talking about word of miscommunication. He said, I've only been married twice. I said, I was trying to find out how many he had. So we just had a good laugh over that. But religion has played a very important part, and like I said, I'm confident in saying that we had a few agnostics, but we didn't have any atheists. Yes, sir.
Thank you for your service, but my question is it true that McNamara and Johnson announced ahead of time when we did our bombings over there, and they announced to the Vietnamese that we were going to bomb certain areas?
Unfortunately, that's something that we've done throughout our history. In other words, we tried to tell them ahead of time so they could remove their civilians, but it has just the opposite effect. In other words, when we announced a target, they were pretty specific. They gave the time of the target and all this stuff. And most leaders would just give them a general sense, we want to hit that area, so you have an option of getting your civilians out. But the Vietnamese would actually go in and set up a makeshift hospital, so when you blew it up, you really couldn't see anything but a Red Cross sign, et cetera, et cetera. And so this is the game they played. People don't realize, they say, well, we bombed the dikes and dams. Well, we could have hit the dikes north of Hanoi in a matter of 2 hours, and Hanoi and Haiphong would have floated into the Tonkin Gulf. And so we did not hit any dikes, and we had so many rules of engagement. It was the last message I heard on the radio when I got shot down was unauthorized disposal of the ordnance in the local area. The airplane that was escorting us took a hit in the rocket pod, and they couldn't jettison their rockets to stay with us and protect us. They had to go out to the ocean and drop them. We couldn't hit a truck if a truck was going down the road. And if the truck, all he had to do was get one wheel off the road, then we weren't allowed to shoot at it. I mean, it was some of the ridiculous things, and we're sending $25 million airplanes up there that can't shoot at a truck. As long as it had to have all four wheels on the road. Some of the most ridiculous mess we've ever seen. But in certain respects, you know, we tried to minimize civilian casualties by telling them, but we didn't have to get as specific as we did, you know, and allow them to know exactly when our troops were going to be there. So, I mean, we went overboard, you know, to solve that problem.
Hey, you mentioned the French.
Yes, sir.
Battle of Tango was 54.
Yes, sir.
I always understood that they captured the French. There they killed them.
No, there were some that were held captive.
And they were in the same facility you were in?
They were not in the same facility, no, sir. They were in a different facility.
They were held until you all were released.
They were held 5 years after we were released. They were not released until 1979.
Were there any others Americans where you were?
Everyone in my group was and/or accounted for. When I say that, it was one of our obligations. We kept a firm list. You know, we first started out memorizing names, and then all I was required, I was a class of 65, so I had to remember all the names of the class of 65, and then we got class of 66, 67, 68. So everybody in those year groups were required to memorize all the names, and those names were compared. And yes, everyone that was on our list was and/or accounted for.
Well, I guess were there South Vietnamese who were captured there in prison? Were
No,
there
sir.
Laotians or Thais?
We had 2 Laotians and 3 Thais that were with us, and they supported us all the way. All 5 of them spoke English, and they were in captivity with us. And they were kind of, I hate to use the term bus boys, but they did the things we weren't allowed to do, you know, and they served us with honor. In fact, we just buried the last one, not the last one, but one of the last ones in Thailand last year. And we have one that he's proudly having his first American grandchild. His daughter came when he came to the state, DAC, and she graduated from the Air Force Academy, and at 40 years old, she's produced him twin granddaughters. So when the rest of us are becoming great-grandfathers, he's becoming a grandfather. Yes, sir.
As long as we've hit all the hot spots, what about Hanoi Jane? What is your take on that, if you know anything about it?
Well, the ladies hold their ears. It ain't but one word description. It's bitch. I'm sorry. You know, before I went to Korea, I went down and I was briefed, and this old crusty old staff sergeant, you know, said, Airman, said a few things you need to remember. First of all, when you step out of the realm of the United States of America, you represent yourself. You represent your family. You represent the United States Air Force. But most of all, you represent the United States of America, and to act accordingly. And so I regret that Jane Fonda never got that message. I was relieved I did when the Ken Burns thing came out. They played a tape that had been hidden for 40 years, where she directly called me a criminal, told the world that I should be tried for my crimes, that I should be convicted, and I should be executed. Could you imagine how you would feel if someone that you, I don't say necessarily respected, but you knew was an American, took to the airwaves to recommend that you be executed? I mean, that was her voice, it wasn't mine. There's a lot of things on the news you can't believe, and that's just the propaganda tactics, is to fill the airways with BS, so you don't know which is fact and which is fiction. The fact is that she said that herself. The fact she wore their uniform. The fact that she sat down at the ACAC site was being actively used to shoot down American pilots. All the rest of it is irrelevant. And I think she should be held accountable. But, you know, like I said, they go hide and reappear and move on with life. I gained a great respect for Dolly Parton when she got stuck between those two, Lillian Tomley and Jane Fonda, when she was blindsided and she just sat there, just like my friend Cag Stockdale when he said, "What am I, a potted plant?" Because she was definitely, she showed real character when she just stood there and with disbelief.
Thank you, Bill.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Oh, Bill, I'm gonna mention your books.
Oh, yeah. I have copies of my book. It's the paperback is $20 and the hardbacks are $30 if anybody is interested in it. It covers what I didn't cover, and it just basically, it's my life and I'm sticking to it. But again, thank you. Thank you for what you do, because it's simply could be described in your title as "I Care," and that's what we need in America today. I don't care what anyone's political persuasions are, and we just got to be able to figure out a way to get along and act in the best interest of our country. Thank you.
Amen. You good? There you go. All right, we're gonna close it up, but stick around for selling the books. I'll let you through here. Wow, well, that's one of the most inspirational and heartfelt and painful presentations we've ever had, Bill. Thank you so much for your service. I mean, the whole time I went to grade school and high school, he was in prison. I mean, in a couple of years of college, I mean, I can't imagine. All right, we're gonna have a Sergeant at Arms report. Mark.
Today we had 16 members, the faculty speaker was 17.
Thank you, Mark. All right, we'll be here next Wednesday, and thank you all for your service. Amen.